Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Famvestor Podcast. I'm your host, Sunny Burns.
And I'm your co-host, Sunmarie Burns.
So today we are talking all about allowance. It's a really cool journey of discovery. We kind of listened to John Lanza and his, how he thought of the idea of allowance and his whole teaching money concepts to kids. And, we've always been on the fence about allowance, but he makes this really interesting case for why you should have an allowance.
Right. Yeah, I found it very insightful. It gave me a lot of ideas and inspirations on how to be intentional with the money discussions with your children, regardless of how young or old they are. If you have a 5-year-old or 10-year-old or 13-year-old, how you can have meaningful conversations
about
money.
And the importance of them having their own, discretionary money to spend, whether they earn it somehow or, they get that allowance. 6-year-olds who are saying get $6 a week, 7-year-olds get $7 a week, and just doing that dollar increment. But then also going to a breakthrough allowance once they are old enough and giving them the responsibility of paying all their, recurring expenses. If they want a cell phone, they got to pay that out of that breakthrough allowance, and clothing and all that, and giving them that responsibility and making, those smaller mistakes early on so that you learn later on not to make those big mistakes when it really matters. And, you're not talking about $1 here, $1 there, but thousands of dollars and,
Right.
Negative debt and that compound interest. So really a great talk overall. Really excited to talk with John Lanza and hear his perspective. I think he offers a lot and really builds a great framework for how to introduce this into your family. Anyway, before we get into the episode, I wanted to share a quick update. I know a few episodes ago we were talking about transitioning our kids from our bedroom into their own bedroom, and I think that was like almost 2 months ago now. So I just want to report that, that transition went pretty well. They've been sleeping in their own bedroom, and pretty much every single night we haven't had any issues. Sometimes when the sun comes out early in the morning, they will kind of crawl into the bed and, sleep a few more hours. But usually that's, 7, 8 a.m. So I feel that's pretty acceptable. One thing that happened, when we transitioned Valen and Alvin into their bunk bed in their room, is Valen was kind of saying like he was scared of shadows and kept saying, I'm scared, can't sleep because I'm scared.
Kind of fighting sleep because he was scared, apparently, we found out of the shadows he saw.
Yeah, so our solution was, put more night lights, give him a flashlight, but, all these things create more shadows.
Right.
So one thing we did that I thought was kind of novel and has really helped and put an end to any of the complaints about, sleeping alone.
And shadows.
And shadows was installing a smart bulb. So about smart bulbs. We found this one particular smart bulb at Home Depot during Black Friday, and it's you don't need a base or anything. You just literally, it's like any other bulb. You take out the old bulb, you put in a new bulb, you use your my iPhone or any app to program the smart bulb. And what we did is we programmed it so we don't have a dimmer switch or anything, but we made it into like a nightlight dimmed bulb, and you don't need to use the app every time. We programmed it so if we flicked the light switch, a regular old light switch, if we flicked it once it would be a regular light, but if we flicked it twice it would turn to nightlight mode, so a very dim light. And we also programmed it to turn off at certain times. So we have nightlight mode on, but we have it programmed to turn off completely at like midnight. And then it turns back on at around like 7:30 when it's okay for them to come out of bed. But between midnight and 7:30 it's completely dark. It allows them to have better sleep and not interrupt with light in the room. And then turns back on to kind of signal to them, okay, now it's daytime, you can wake up. And
right.
So, I don't know, I thought it was a really cool, innovative solution I haven't heard other parents talk about. The overhead light eliminated all shadows, so that fear went away. But it also is a great tool to, tell them, when to wake up and all of that. So
it's been working really well with them. They like it. It's sufficient for a nightlight for sure. I guess I would like if it was slightly dimmer.
Yeah, I
honestly,
agree.
it's quite sufficient, and it has helped a whole lot with his fear factor of going
right.
to
I haven't
night.
heard a single complaint about fear since then.
And he
that's
hasn't
almost like a month
needed
ago.
a whole barrage of flashlights at hand. Like it was getting excessive at a point.
And
of
he'd
like,
leave them on all
he'd
night,
have
so we had to get new
6
batteries.
flashlights that he'd prop between his bunk bed, aiming in different directions around the room.
We tried the glow in the dark stars. We tried everything, but ultimately, this nightlight, this overhead bulb, smart bulb, really ended up being the ideal solution.
Yeah.
So just wanted to share that with everyone, and hopefully that helps your own sleeping family. So
Right.
I'll link to the actual bulb that we bought in the show notes, so feel free to check that out. Without further ado, let's enjoy the show.
You're listening to the FamVestor Podcast. If you're looking to raise your family with intention, gain financial independence, and live a life of true freedom, you're in the right place. Join us as we explore together how to create thriving families, because strong families are the cornerstone for a world at peace.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the FamVestor Podcast. I'm excited today because we are talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, something that we've tried starting with our own kids, and, you know, I think fairly successful, but definitely want to bring in kind of someone who's more researched the topic, has been known to talk about it, and today I'm excited to have John Lanza here on the show talking about the Art of Allowance, pretty much how to set up an allowance for your kids, and we're going to explore that topic in depth. And I've heard him talk before. I'm very excited to get him on the show finally. And so yeah, let's all just welcome to the show John Lanza.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, John, so awesome to get you on. I reached out to you actually months and months ago, and, you know, it was silence, no response. I was like, John, I want you on the show. Nothing. And then finally, I don't know, just recently you had a booking agent come up to us and was like, do you want John Lanza on the show? I'm like, yes, I asked him months ago. So glad to have you.
I don't know what happened with that. I'm sorry. It's not like I'm that busy. I can only plead ignorance on that one.
No worries. We'll
glad it
forgive you.
worked
We'll
out.
forgive you this time. But no, glad to have you here, John. And John, you know, it sounds like you've been doing amazing work. I can't wait to read The Art of Allowance. I haven't read it myself, but I heard, you know, it's pretty short, but really valuable, a lot of value there. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm hoping that this conversation we have today can inspire others to read it and get a little taste of what's in there. And I think it's a topic that a lot of parents really resonate with, you know, how to, you know, if allowance is a good thing, and, you know, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of 2 cents on that, and, you know, what's the point of introducing it. But before we kind of dig into that, why don't we talk about maybe your journey? What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah. The interesting part of that is that, so I grew up in New Jersey, as we discussed
New
before.
Jersey.
Yeah, Jersey. And my dad was a banker,
Okay.
but we really didn't discuss money that much. And so I remember them starting kind of an allowance because that's kind of what you do, but there wasn't a lot of structure to it.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents were good models. So my parents both are very frugal. They did get divorced when I was 11, and then, you know, everything goes off the rails in terms of teaching your kids at that point. But I do remember them starting an allowance, and then I remember it just kind of fizzling out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's primarily because there just wasn't any purpose behind it. It was like, let's just give an allowance because that's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
And so it didn't kind of go anywhere. And I think that's part of the reason that I wrote the book was I know that parents think about the term, and they either think, well, I don't want to give my kids a handout, or I don't need a book on that because my parents gave me an allowance, but likely it was not it wasn't a purposeful allowance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to have the intent there, because that gets you past it kind of helps you get past this idea that it is a handout.
Right.
And it makes it something that's really active and a great way to teach your kids to be money smart. So yeah, we had a little bit of, really my parents were good models, but there wasn't kind of a structure for teaching us about money necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came time, because you have 2 kids, right? So when it came time to raise your kids, is that when you started thinking about this thought of allowance again and how you want to implement it differently?
Oh, that's exactly when it happened. So when my now 16-year-old was 6 months old, my wife and I were just taking a trip. We're here in Los Angeles now, taking a trip out to Lake Arrowhead just for a little time away from the city. And on that trip, we were discussing what we wanted for our then kid. And, you know, we eventually planned on having more kids. And money smarts just came up as something that we wanted to teach. And I was more of a spender. My wife was much more of a saver. She really is the original money mammal. And just for context, the money mammals are what kind of got us into this. But I'll get to that in a sec. So she and I were talking about it, and we didn't want it to be kind of random, because it felt random, because all of our parents were frugal. But why was she a saver and I was a spender?
Right.
Now, having gone through this and talked to so many parents, you realize that kids just have different money personalities. Now, that's just how it is.
Right.
And you need some kind of system. You need a flexible system to work with them and help the kids who, are savers, help the kids who are spenders, help the kids who are in between. But anyway, at that point, it was, how do we teach them about money? And my natural inclination was, because I came from entertainment and some education, I was a camp counselor. And so I've always worked with kids on some level. And so it's just kind of a natural thought to me to say, well, let's just make it fun. Let's take something that doesn't seem very fun on its face, teaching kids about money. Because, if you say that, if you talk to your 5-year-old and say, let's sit down and talk about money, the kid's just going to, they're going to stare at you. But if you say, hey, Joe the monkey and Clara J. Camel want to sing about saving for a red straw hat, suddenly they're paying attention. So,
right.
So
bringing it to their level so that they can understand the larger concepts in a more concrete way.
Yeah. And just making it fun for them. That's really the key thing. And kids very quickly figure all this stuff out, and very quickly they're aware of money. And you want to, I think, one of the key elements of all of this is just starting a conversation with your kids, and, getting them excited about it from a young age, and being prepared to talk to them, not being prepared to know everything about money, but just being prepared to talk to them and answer their questions is really important, because the questions are going to come up fast and they're going to come up quickly, and you don't want to ignore them, because that's a danger, because they're going to learn from somewhere.
Right.
And you'd rather have them learn it from you than from TV or media or wherever it might be.
Right. Yeah. I think it's such an important conversation to have. Like when I grew up, it was just constant topic that was always talked about was money. And then you had the opposite experience in your upbringing. No one talked about money. It just was like taboo. A taboo subject. So,
yeah.
But luckily we both, like you were saying, there's that money personality. Actually, first time I'm hearing that. But, we both kind of grew up as savers. So.
But it is true that there are different propensities. Some people are more likely to spend and others are less likely. So learning how to put that in check regardless of what type of personality you have is so important. So that's a key point you mentioned. Just
making it, available to talk about, discussion. And I think that's what, you want to kind of go into about allowances, and just that kind of starts the conversation, starts using it as a tool to start the knowledge of, handling money and all the whole world behind that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think it comes up so many times, like when I've had conversations on my podcast with parents and experts, the allowance really is so very much a conduit to conversation, and really a lifelong conversation, and from as simple as starting off with, saving for a goal for a young kid, and as complex as getting into investment. Even when you're not, and not to jump ahead too far, but even when you're not an investing expert, which I'm not, you can tell your kids that. And then when they're interested, you can just find out the answers that you need to find out. And the best part about it is, so my daughter expressed some interest in buying some stock. She bought like 3 shares of Adidas, just because, even though the advice, buy what you know, is not necessarily the best advice, it's a good way to learn.
Yeah, right? Great starting point. You're interested, you're engaged, you'll follow it.
Yeah. And what was cool about that was it led to conversations I never would have thought about having right off the top. So that ended up being, it happened to shoot up quickly. So we discussed short-term versus long-term capital gains. We discussed commissions. We discussed, we had a little bit of a conversation about compound interest, but it gets into, and risk. And if I sat down, just like I said before, like if I sat down and said, let's have a conversation about risk.
Yeah.
I'd be like, ugh.
That's really cool. So how old was your daughter when she bought those 3 stocks of Adidas?
She was, I'm so bad at remembering the age. So it actually was 2015. Okay. So she was 13.
13 years old. That's so awesome.
12 or 13. She bought them in our account. So.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, well, the funny part is, she bought at a time when, you could have bought pretty much anything and it would have gone up.
Especially this
Would've
past
done
year
well
was
for
pretty
you.
good.
Yeah. So, of course, as soon as she does that, she's like, oh, I should have put more money in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a book. Have you guys read, what is it called? Your Money in Your Brain by Jason Zweig by any chance?
No, I haven't read that one.
It's a great investor book in terms of trying to, if you're trying to understand why you may or may not be a good investor, you're basically, most of us just aren't naturally, because our brains just feed on, we feed on wins, and we are averse to losses. And it's a really interesting book that makes you feel comfortable when you realize, oh, okay, that's the reason that I probably am not going to be in stocks, is because I'm just not comfortable. I'm just going to stick with funds versus stocks. And that doesn't mean that's for everybody, but there's a lot in that book. So
I'm curious, with your daughter, now 4 years later, has that evolved into anything? Has she taken more interest, or was that just kind of a time period thing where she was shortly interested in it?
No, she's been very interested in it. So we started, there's another program called Stockpile, or online. It's not really a program. It's a website where you can buy shares, not shares. You can buy micro shares of companies. And what's nice is they can find a brand and then find the parent company of that brand. So if they're interested in finding something, they can use Stockpile to do that. But they can invest in something that they wouldn't be able to invest in. Like Tesla is at 470 now. You can invest,
just
$1 in it. Yeah,
nice.
It's a great learning tool.
It really is a good learning tool. And so that was good. So they bought a few stocks in there, and then we set up a fund. And I'm not promoting Stockpile. We don't get anything from that. That is one example that we use. Right. And then we opened up two mutual funds that we matched their money. So they put in 500, we matched 500, and then we automate from their allowance. And I just suggested to them to do this, and then they did it, which is they're now investing $20 a month in there. It's just to get in their head this idea of paying yourself first and of saving as a habit into an account that will grow over time. And then obviously we also show them the compound interest chart as regularly as we can, just to say, this is how you're starting really early. You have a head start on so many people. Don't stop this habit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
So that's a regular brokerage account, or that's an IRA that they have?
That is a regular brokerage account.
Okay.
Yeah. And the mutual fund accounts are the UGMA accounts, right? Uniform Gift to Minors Act accounts.
I don't know what that is.
So it's either UGMA or UTMA. I'm forgetting the name. I think it's UGMA, but it means that that I'm the custodian of the account. Right. I will revert to them, I think, when there's an age, and I can't remember the age.
Okay.
Versus the initial investment was just in our account.
Right. So their name is there. You're just custodial of that, but they have access to make trades that they want, or it's up to you to allow that.
In that account, well, I just control that account, but it's in their names.
Okay.
So like the original stock is not in their name, but the Stockpile accounts are in their names, and then the we have them in Vanguard accounts, so that it's in their names, but I'm the custodian of both accounts.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we also have Vanguard. We were actually lucky enough to start an IRA with our son when he was 0. Actually, he did some modeling for us. But it's awesome to see, those little, gains. Like $3,000 is going to turn into like, I forget what the calculation was, but it was like 300,000, and when he's like, by the time he's like 65, it's just crazy, the compound interest and the over the those huge time spans, what it'll do.
Those programs you just mentioned, do they have an age limit in which you can enroll your kids, or is it pretty much as young as you choose to get them,
the custodial accounts
involved? That
is a good question. I think 13, but I would have to check. I'll find that out. We can maybe put that in the show notes or something, because I don't remember the specifics on it, but they were old enough, and I think my 14-year-old was 13 when we started. I'm pretty sure it's 13.
Okay, so before we jump into we jumped into the 13-year-old. Let's revert back to you're talking about 6 months old, but training the money mind that eventually got into the stocks and stuff. But prior to that, how did you get them interested in kind of money? How did you get them to buy into that future idea of putting in $20 automatic investing in their money? What was those seeds that you planted early on? Can we dive into that?
Yes, let's go back to the beginning. So the beginning is really setting up an allowance. At a good age, you're going to have conversations with them before this, and maybe some play money when they go to the store. But setting up an allowance, a good age is 5 years old, and a simple allowance setup, which pretty much any expert will tell you is just kind of like roughly $5 per week per age of the child, right? So I mean. Okay. Dollars per week per age of the child. So $5 for a 5-year-old per week.
So $9 for a 9-year-old.
But the key thing here is setting up a system so that you've got them starting to understand how to make choices. So there are 3 jars. We have the share jar, which is for charitable giving. We've got the save jar, which is for slightly longer-term items. And we've got the spend smart jar. And we say spend smart. That's something that we came up with the money mammals. And it's more than just a semantic game, because what we want them to be doing is just be thinking about the choices that they're making when they get their money, right? Mm-hmm. And in our case, we are requiring them. So we're kind of nudging them to make or opting them into making certain choices. So the way that works is when they get their $5, they are required to put 1 into the share jar, charitable giving, 1 into the save jar, and then 3 go into the spend smart jar, although those 3 are discretionary. So they have total control over those. They could put them into the save jar, they can put them into the share jar, or they can just use them for spending, right? And then what happens is at some point, so now they have their money. So now when you go to the store and they ask for something, you don't get it for them. Right. Obviously you get them the standards. You get them food and you get them clothes and you provide shelter. But now if they have a want when they go to the store, then you have a conversation. Now the first few times this may not be easy. There are almost definitely going to be some tantrums, but that's where you want to stay strong because the kids figure it out very fast. And it provides you with a learning opportunity right off the bat, because if you have a kid, some kids don't care. They don't want to spend their money. They just keep socking it away. And that's fine. That is what it is. It's not even good or bad. It is what it is. But some kids will want something. So for example, my daughter, when she was 6, wanted to buy a scooter. So immediately they don't have enough money in their spend smart jar, right? So even if they brought it with them, they're like, well, I want that. Well, you don't have enough money. Right. So now you're set up for a conversation. And that is when we get home, we're going to go to the save jar and we're going to set up a goal for you to buy that item, right? And when you do that, then you sit down and you say, okay, well, this thing costs $24. And let's just say for argument's sake, you have no dollars in your save jar. You could put in, say you're going to take out of your $5 allowance, $3 a week now and put it in the save jar. That's going to take you 8 weeks to get to what you need to save for your scooter. You take a picture of the scooter, you put it on there. So you're teaching them a little bit about visualizing. You put the time it's going to take, you put the money it's going to take. And that's kind of called, have you heard of the term SMART goals, SMART? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Yeah. Obviously, you're not talking to a 5-year-old about that, right? But you're introducing them to that concept,
visualizing the goal, and yeah.
And then at allowance time each week, when you're sitting down with them, you can say, okay, well, here's your $5. You could get there faster if you put more money into your save jar, right? And I kind of jumped ahead to the goal, because the other thing is getting back to what I said before. When parents have an issue with allowance, a lot of times it comes down to they don't want it to be a handout, right? Mm-hmm. And it is a handout if you're not purposeful with it. So when you start the allowance with your 5-year-old, you want to say to them, I'm giving you this money to help teach you to learn to use money as a tool, whatever language you want to use that's appropriate for your 5-year-old. Say, I want you to get smart with this money. I want you to think when you're receiving this money, right? I'm going to teach you about saving. We're going to teach you about sharing. We're going to teach you about spending smart. You don't belabor the point, but you get a weekly opportunity to talk about that. And it's definitely worth mentioning it from time to time. And the other key thing is to give them control. So if they go in and they go to the store and they have the $3 burning a hole in their pocket and they want to get something is junk, you let them do it, to the extent that it's not, outside the family rules, you let them do it.
Right.
And I think that's a tough thing for parents. And it doesn't mean that you can't be a guide as a parent. And what I would allow is different than what you guys might allow, than what other parents, that's fine. But what you don't want to do is control their decisions. You want to give them the autonomy of using this money, because you're trying to empower them to use money as a tool, because ultimately that's where you want them to. You want to get to that point where money doesn't really hold sway over them. They have control over their money. That's the kind of long-term goal, is kind of money empowerment idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And, we've seen it in our own, like when he was 3 years old, our eldest, he would, and he still kind of does, we take him to Walmart, and yeah, he has his own like wallet he brings with him, and he'll be like buying those 97-cent Hot Wheels cars. And then he'd be like, oh, but I want that, $20 Mack truck. And then we'd be like, well, you don't have enough money because you keep buying these Hot Wheels cars. Right. And, but at 3 years old, this starts to sink into his brain. And, I remember one time he was just like, well, I have my money, but can we use your money to buy this? And he like understands, the difference there. And I like what you said about the goals jar, because we haven't done this separate like give, save, spend. Yeah. It's mostly like, he earns his money. We have like quarters in our coin operated laundry machines, and he rolls up the coin sleeves, the quarter sleeves. So like every $10 roll of quarters he rolls, we give him a quarter. So that's his job, and that's kind of how he's been earning money. But it accrues pretty fast, actually. So he definitely has this.
If he has something in mind he wants to buy, he's like, Mom, I need $2. I want to roll 8 rolls of quarters today. But
I like what you said about the save thing, because we told him he really wanted to go to Disneyland, and we told him, hey, I told him if you save $200, we can go to Disneyland, and it sounds like insurmountable for a now 4-year-old, but he had like $60, but I think it didn't work. We went to Florida last maybe 3 weeks ago. We didn't end up taking to Disneyland because he didn't save it up all the way. But I told him anyway, you're probably not going to save it now, maybe in another year or so. But it would be cool, and what we should do, after this conversation, is set up a jar, put a picture of Disneyland on it, and, now he has that visual reminder, like, I really want to go to Disneyland over buying those Hot Wheels cars at Walmart, and, and talking to him about that and making it more of a visual reminder of that goal. And, so that's something we should definitely set up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the age and the context, because that's one of the things that I advise parents to do, is make sure that the goal is kind of within range of something that they can keep track of. So, for a 5-year-old, and you already knew this, but like 200 that's a large goal especially for an initial goal.
Yeah,
and it's good to keep it in some kind of range of. Rough, and different kids are different, but roughly 2 months of time, maybe even a month of time, somewhere between $15 and $25 is a good starting point.
Right.
Yeah.
But they can quickly jump, because I went from that was the first goal, was the scooter. Her second goal was an American Girl doll.
Oh boy.
And this tested my thesis here, because I of course expensive. I didn't want her to buy an American Girl doll. Like, it's $100 for
can't do it.
Yeah, it's $100 for the naked doll. Like,
yeah. And then all those
so expensive. But she made that jump. Like, so she made that because that's what she wanted. So it took her like 6 months, and
wow.
And I'm sure you were proud of her and happy to go along with her as she bought it, right?
I really was. Actually, I will give, and there's actually a picture in my book of her at the counter, because it gave us an opportunity. You always look for learning opportunities. So she had collected all of her money, and she had it in bags. She had her coins in bags, her dollars in bags.
Yeah.
And to their credit, this must not have been the first time this happened. Yeah. They were wonderful about it. Right. So, because there are a lot of cashiers that would have looked at that and said, "You got to be kidding!"
Right. No, I've been impressed with the cashiers who have been like very, very pleasant and patient.
With payouts and quarters.
Yeah, but that's awesome.
Yeah, amazing.
Now, what's funny is she eventually realized she's not really an American Girl doll kid, and she ended up selling the doll for like $20. So she learned something else.
Yeah. Hey, and she learned the value of resale too.
Yes.
So many people don't understand that there's potential there too, you know.
Yeah.
Not full returns, but definitely something back on your dollar.
Yeah. And depreciation happens quickly with an American Girl doll.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes, it does. But that's impressive. Yeah, I think we knew setting out that $200 goal, it was pretty unattainable, and honestly we didn't want to go to Disney World this past trip. But I think for it to really be a valuable learning experience is to set it, as you mentioned, on a more attainable goal, so that they can feel the pride of reaching that goal and hitting that target, and then going out and actually buying it with their hard-earned money, you know, and and constantly revisiting, do I really want this item enough to continue to save for it?
Yeah.
That's a great point. That's exactly right. And the other thing that happens is, as they get older, they'll get larger allowances, and then we move into, when they become teens and tweens, their allowances get larger, and they might start earning money. So our kids now are babysitting, so they can amass the money for a lot of their little goals very quickly. So one of the things that we instituted is a thing called the waiting period. Which is anything that's over $50, you got to wait a week for. If it's $100, you got to wait 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I think that's a good. It's, you know, there's an argument to be made that you should just give them control, right? And I wouldn't argue against that. This is just another tactic that you can employ. And if you're not comfortable with that and you want to just give them control, that's fine. It's just another tactic. And I think what's good about it is that, one, it is you're just trying to introduce them to habits and ideas that they will hopefully want to use when they get older. You want stuff that's going to be in their head. It doesn't mean that when they're 25 and they want a $50 item, they're not going to buy a $50 item. But it might mean that if there's a $500 TV, they might wait a week. They might wait 2 weeks. They might
sleep on those big buying decisions. Yeah.
And then you also as a parent, you can model that. You know, it's like I bought this bag that was $200, and I waited 6 months because it was an obscene amount of money to pay for this bag, but I knew exactly the kind of bag that I wanted, and I could not find. I wanted a stand-up triangular bag. I looked around for all different models. I couldn't find it, and when I bought it, I told him, I said, "This is an obscene amount of money, but I can't find anything. I've waited 6 months." And I bought that about 5 years ago. It's been a great bag. So, there's so many opportunities to model and talk to your kids and let them know where you've made your mistakes, and also try to verbalize what you're doing in your mind to make money choices. Because a lot of times they don't see that.
That's true.
And it's good for them to kind of hear what's going through your mind to process.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I love that, like, $50 waiting period and setting that. And like you said, making it a habit for them so that they carry that through to when they're older. Yeah. But also, giving them the freedom for those lower purchases to really buy what they want. Because I feel like, and I think you would agree, and I've heard you say something similar, is just allowing them the flexibility to make those kind of mistakes now. Buying 100 Hot Wheels cars that he ends up not playing with, but realizing if I had saved more, and he's starting to do that he could have met those bigger goals that he wished he would have had, and making those mistakes now so he doesn't have to suffer later with maybe leasing a brand new car or something like that down the line.
That's exactly. You want to make the mistakes in a low stakes environment.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's a really valuable point you mentioned, is that delayed gratification, or that wait period, because a lot of times what I think even adults don't realize is, in the moment they're under the pressure of marketing. In that moment, they see something, it's attractive, appealing, they like it, they want it. It's completely spontaneous, and it is a learned skill to be able to step back from that and separate yourself from that trap. Essentially, it's a trap. It's been researched and designed specifically to make you want to buy it. Right. So if you can strategically pull yourself back and learn that skill and wait on it and really think it through, at home where you're not being influenced by the ads, then you'll be more likely to make a better decision. It's so interesting because, and I know you mentioned this on your blog and in your programs and in your book, the marketing towards children, really to everyone in our consumer society, starts from a very young age, and even with children. And I notice in my son as well, we don't watch a whole lot of TV, but every now and then he's with a relative or someone, the TV will be on and they'll be watching cartoons. And all of a sudden, for the next week, he's just like listing off these toys that I've never even heard of and he's never even heard of. He's like, I really want this. I gotta go get this. And I'm like, where did this come from? And I realized that it is from that direct marketing that's being thrown at them, and in our culture, there's so much of that. So to learn how to pull back from that and really assess a situation, is it a need, a want, or something that's lasting for you, or is it just a momentary, inspiration? Yeah,
it's that you said it perfectly. That is it, and it's I tell my kids I consider myself kind of a reformed spender, and my thing is tech, and I see something new and I just want it, but the only thing is just a little bit of time and a little bit of age. Finally, I've realized that, I'm not going to feel, it's not going to make me feel better. It might give me a temporary, dopamine boost for a few hours, maybe a few days, but it's in the long run, it's not going to do anything for you.
And it might actually make you feel worse because you're now overrun with stuff.
Yeah. Yes, stuff is a big thing in our house. We've cut back a lot of stuff, and because you guys are in the weeds, so you're in the because people send you.
That's
the tough part of that.
It is, and they grow out of things so quick too. Yeah,
we're finally out of those, so we're starting to pull. We just did a major cleaning recently, because when we go out, we were just as I told you guys, we were back east for our winter vacation, and we Airbnb our place.
Oh, wow.
And that actually, what's nice about that is it gets us to get the kids to start to clean up, to really kind of cleanse. But there is a disturbing element of it, of the whole thing, where you said, where you look at everything that you have, and it's the amount of stuff that accumulates, even when you're really vigilant about keeping stuff under control,
right.
It's very easy to accumulate.
Right.
Yeah, we did a podcast episode recently about our experience with Marie Kondo, and her whole thing is like gather a certain subject item and all around the house. So we did shoes first, and we were so surprised. How many pairs of shoes did we have? Because we kind of consider ourselves to be minimalist, but we had 75 shoes for this family of 4. With 2 little kids and us 2. 75 shoes is insane. And I was just like, we're minimalist. Maybe we'll have like a total of 10 pairs of shoes. 75 of them, and half of them we knew we could just get rid of, like right off the bat almost. And it was just if you like you said, when you actually go through it and you realize how much you have, it's mind-boggling.
Well, I went through the KonMari. I went through the first half. I haven't done, because the second half really requires us to do it together. And one of the things she says in the book, and it's a very good point, is you can't do it to other people. So I did all my clothes, and I'm not at like the James Altucher amount. I think he has like 15 items that he owns, period. I have very few clothes. There's 2 things that I think are important is when you do go through that process of going minimalist, is one, some people think people are going to notice. Nobody notices, because nobody's paying attention to what you're wearing. They're paying attention to what they're wearing.
Yep.
That's one. And then 2, I forgot the second point. It wasn't that important.
Okay, well, if you think of it, let us know.
If I think of it, I'll let you know.
I definitely wanted to, so we got to continue this allowance thing. There's definitely a lot of questions in my head. But I wanted to really quickly go back to, you said you went on vacation to the East Coast to your family, but you Airbnb'd your house while you were there. And did that make that like a net neutral vacation, or just kind of, and is that something common you did, or this was the first time you did it? Because that's a fascinating idea.
It's the third time we did it, and it was not, it's not net neutral. I wish it were.
Okay.
But it was pretty good, because when we go back east, it happened that my dad was out of town, so we could use his car. So Our parents really came, and we stay at my in-laws. So it was a relatively inexpensive vacation,
Nice.
you know?
Wow.
And it was good. And the kids got to go into New York. We let them actually kind of free range into New York themselves, and they enjoyed that. So yeah, it was not net neutral, but it was closer to net neutral than some other vacations.
And all 3 times that you did it, when you were gone for maybe like a week, you're saying, was that easy to find someone to book your place just for that 1 week window? Like how many months in advance did you let people know that would be available for that week?
Well, my wife does more. She's a realtor, so she handles more of that. So I can't really say how easy or hard it is.
Right.
I kind of just I'm in a support role.
Okay. And you've been pretty happy. You didn't come back to like.
I think it's harder on her than, you know, we all help, but she's the one who has to carry the kind of the psychic burden of making sure that it's booked and that it's clean and ready to go when the people come. Like she just carries that, and I'm very thankful that she does, because she makes sure that the place is in tip-top shape and keeps us in line.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, that's another great money spending, money leveraging concept that you're modeling for your kids too. Just the idea that you can travel in resourceful ways and do something like Airbnb.
Subsidize some of your travel. Yeah.
Right, I love that.
Yeah, it's another travel hack you don't really hear too often. Okay, so digging back to allowances, I feel like, you know, even us, we have trouble with the idea, like you kind of mentioned earlier, of giving a handout. But I see, you know, throughout this conversation, you know, how powerful it is as a money tool, and, you know, how else is it. It's hard to, you know, have kids have a job at such young ages and to get that money to start using and really utilizing, so that you get a sense of what it is and how to use it, and the power when you control it and not let it control you. So what do you say to parents? Do you say give them an allowance no matter what? If they were like terrible, if they got F's on their report cards, they're still getting allowance, or is it behavior based?
It is definitely not behavior based. Okay. And we don't tie it to chores either. Here's the reason. I understand why parents like to tie it to chores, right? Because it just seems like it makes sense. You know, you got to work to earn money. Mm-hmm. That is an important lesson. It's a different lesson than what allowance teaches. So, and this isn't to say, I even say in the book, I'm like, if you can't get past this, you're better off. It's better that you're giving some kind of allowance, and if you have to tie it to chores, then do it. But I'll explain why I don't think you need to. Is that the allowance serves a purpose. So the purpose is to teach our kids to get smart with money. That is the purpose. So you're giving them, in essence, training money. That's what you're doing, right? Chores teach your kids as chores that earn money teach your kids that you have to work to earn money. Great lesson. Totally different lesson. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is there are certain, and I think generally there's agreement on this now, because you're probably talking about over and above, you know, above and beyond chores, as some people describe them. The basic chores around the house, I don't think in general, most parents aren't paying for those now. So like the basic thing, if you require them to clean the rooms or do the dishes, those are just chores that should be done. Right. But for other chores, we don't tie it to allowance, because one, if there's something that you would pay someone else for, you can, and they want to do it, let's say cleaning the car, then you can give them that opportunity to do that and make some money. That teaches them that they have to work in order to make some money. Right. But an allowance is something that you're using actively and purposefully to teach them to learn to make choices, to learn to set and save for goals, to learn about charitable giving, because we really haven't talked a lot about the share jar, to learn how to deal with delayed gratification, going to the store with money in your pocket and coming out of the store with still money in your pocket. Like, those are all hugely valuable lessons. And that's the reason that you don't tie them together. The other benefit, this is not the reason to not do it. This is not the reason to decouple chores and allowance. But when you set up chores, because you're always going to have conflict with chores, kids just don't want to do them, you know, right. Unless you have some, you know, unbelievably wonderful.
Not child. Here.
Yeah, it's a constant battle. Nobody wants to do their chores, right? And what we're trying to do is as much as possible societally, there's so much negativity around money. So we're trying to, we don't want negativity around money. So there's this, again, it's not the reason to decouple them, but by decoupling them, you are eliminating a huge source of conflict where you're saying, I'm not going to give you this money because you haven't done the chore. I'm not going to give you this allowance, which is an opportunity to train and have conversations because you haven't done this chore. Just take that out of the equation. And that's another side benefit to not tying chores to allowance. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my 2 cents on the tying of those two together.
I think that's a very wise pointer there, because it is true. Then you avoid that whole negative conflict, as you said, and also the potential for children to kind of use it in reverse with you and be like, well, how much are you going to pay me in order for me to do that?
Well, I don't need money this week, so you're on your own.
Right. And then that kind of defeats the other learning teachable moment of just family contribution and household contribution. We all live here. We all have a responsibility and a role to play, right? So if you mix the two, money, allowance and chores, it can actually complicate. And then you have, unsatisfactory results, both in terms of the money learning as well as the household responsibility.
Yeah.
Right.
So
and I want to get, you had mentioned something about the paying for grades. I think Sonny, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
But rewards in general just don't work for motivating kids to do things kind of with intrinsic motivation, things that they want to do themselves. It'll serve the purpose of getting something done right now, but it doesn't serve the intended purpose, and the paying for grades is something that I just wanted to touch on it because the research, there's zero, the research not only notes that paying for grades doesn't help, it actually hurts. So kids who might have been kind of motivated to be really good students when they're paid for it, now that can demotivate them. So I think that's one of the things that I see those kind of programs and I just kind of shake my head that they're very problematic. There's no research that suggests that those programs work in the long term. And so we want to kind of get away from as much as possible, get away from rewards, which are really in essence another form of punishment. There's a really terrific book by Alfie Kohn called Punished by Rewards. And he talks about it. It was published in 1993, but his book he has a afterword from 99 and then a follow-up in 2015, and further research has just confirmed what he brought up in that book. And there's a lot in there about the fact as parents we should be wary of providing rewards to our kids.
Good points. I had a question. You briefly touched on it, and it has been a question in my mind too, is when you have a child who has an allowance and money of their own, and you give them the freedom to make their own decisions for better or for worse on what they want to buy, how do you balance the delicate situations when they're really interested in and have enough money for something that you're not so comfortable with them buying? I recently had this conversation with my 4.5-year-old, and I like to give him the freedom to buy what he likes as long as it's not something that I'm uncomfortable with. But we were somewhere, I don't know, Walmart or the dollar store or something, and there was a toy he wanted that I didn't like. I don't know what it was. It was just not something I thought was good. It made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was a toy weapon thing or something.
A gun or something, yeah.
Perhaps. And I said to him, no, I don't want you to spend your money on that. You can pick another toy of your choice, but not that. And he said, oh, it's okay, Mommy. You don't need to worry about it because it's my money and I'm spending my own money. So it doesn't really matter. This is what I want to buy and I have the money for it. So you really don't need to worry that it's not what you want because I know it's what I want. I'm like, whoa, now. Just because you have the money doesn't mean you can buy whatever if I feel it's not good for you. But it did hit home for me. It's like, how do I still maintain that advisory position, as the parent and that control, where I want to give them the freedom, but at the same token, how do they know to respect when I say no,
Your
it's
ultimate
no.
authority.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though they go, well, it's my money. So, You know, I can see with like an older child, a tween, a teen, it could be quite problematic with like a video game you don't approve of or something. It's like, well, it's my money. You know, I could do whatever I want with it. So how do you handle that kind of situation?
Yeah, it's a good point. With regard to your particular case, I think you're, obviously well within your rights to say no to that. And I'm not sure that I'm equipped to know how that conversation should be had. It feels like that's more of, you might already know what the age appropriate conversation would be, because for you, it's, your values are such that you don't want him having a weapon, whether it's a fake weapon or not. Right.
Right.
It feels like if he's 4.5, you can have that conversation. Right.
Yeah.
So he knows that you're not making a capricious decision. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one. And with ours, with the teenagers as an example, luckily we haven't had that issue. But clothing would be an example. I mean, there are certain types of clothes we wouldn't let them get, but I think they just know that. And we my wife's made that kind of clear to them that that's just not, while they're in our house, they're just not going to have certain types of clothes. Right. So yeah, always the family rules or your family values, as long as they're communicated clearly and the kids understand that, then you certainly have the power to say no. Mm-hmm. And I think it seems like it presents you a really nice opportunity to have, I don't know how rich a conversation, but yeah, probably, for a 4.5, 5-year-old, you can have a pretty good conversation, I think.
Yeah, you can,
right.
For sure.
And I guess it does, even though it's uncomfortable, it does bring up the opportunity to discuss, your values, I guess, and you wouldn't naturally just sit down and be like, all right, here's the list of every single rule our family abides by, because we don't even necessarily know until,
you don't know until
we're faced with it, right?
Right.
So, although it is uncomfortable, it does provide a good learning moment. For both
there's a lot
of
times that things get uncomfortable. There are decisions like I'm sitting here giving you basically the good stories, but there are plenty of times that they have, they're spending money on food, because when they get older, we move into a kind of bigger allowance, right? Mm-hmm. And they get more responsibility. But I'm sitting there again, like, you just spent $10 on, a coffee and something else. And not that we haven't done it too, but you have pretty limited funds and one of them is much better at saving their money than the other one is.
Right.
But it's just, so it's not, there are plenty of kind of cringeworthy moments that they're going about spending the money. And the other point I want to make is that we are very fortunate to be able to give them the allowances that they currently have, right? Not every family can, and you can adjust your plan accordingly.
Right.
So I don't want it to sound like, that we're just kind of giving them, oodles of money. They have it. There's some structure to the money that they're getting. And I like this thought. I was talking to David Owen, who wrote The First National Bank of Dad. And he said his thought on it is that the kids should feel a little bit flush, but not overflowing with money. And I think that's a good point. And I think the main point is that you don't want to give them too little an allowance that you're not really giving them any control. It's kind of a false sense of control. To the extent that you want to give them enough money that they can make useful decisions with that money, based on whatever their responsibilities are. Like, so for our kids, they have to pay for their phone, they have to pay for their food if they're out and about. So if they go to school, we'll buy the food if they're going to make their lunch.
Right.
So if they want to buy lunch at school, they have to pay for it. If they go out with their friends, and then gifts for friends they have to buy, and clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really love that aspect about, having the kids have their own money. It's like, I want something, then you got to buy it with your own money. It's not on us to buy it for them. You want that piece of cotton candy, you got to buy it with your own money now. And it's kind of off your shoulders, and it gives them that, okay, do I really want it or do I not want it? And
And then they're going to have this comfort once they go off on their own. Not to say that they're not going to, we're all kind of learning, making mistakes. It's a constant process, but now they just have some experience. They have practice. They have practice with using it. And so as they start to get larger amounts of money based on the money that they're making when they go out into the job market, they now at least have a context for thinking about it. And they can think, oh, I should put some of this away. I should put some of this into my charitable giving. And that might be a lesser than we're asking, or it might be more than we're asking. That's up to them. But they at least have a sense of when the money's coming in, because it's really important for kids to understand, even if they're not necessarily vocalizing this, that every time we get money, we are making a choice, whether we're making a conscious choice with it to kind of allocate it to different jars or accounts or not. We are making a choice.
Okay.
I will re-ask my question at a later point.
Sorry. I know we didn't touch on this, and I've heard you talk about it, and I think it's a really cool point, which is the second stage allowance. I think you called it the big allowance, or I don't know what you call it.
The breakthrough allowance.
The breakthrough allowance. Can you I think it's worth going into and digging into that later stage breakthrough allowance. I think, you were talking about how in the beginning, a 5-year-old gets $5, a 6-year-old gets $6 a week. What's this breakthrough allowance, and why is it important?
Yeah. So once they become tweens or teens, so, it's anywhere between 10 and 13 and older, depending on what you've got set up. But if they've been getting their allowance in cash from age 5 to 10, then they've had a lot of practice. And so now we go into the breakthrough allowance. So we just tore off the Band-Aid and we gave them a bigger allowance and more responsibility. So what we gave them, so they're getting, right now they're getting, I think, $125 a month. And when you hear that amount, some people's jaws, if they out of context, their jaws will drop and be like, what?
Yeah.
But it's actually, when you realize the responsibilities, then you realize it's not a ton of money. So the $125 a month covers communication. So that's for the phone. The phone itself is $27 for the service. So they pay the extra, that amount that we're paying for the phone service. Then food, then clothes, and then gifts, right? And we negotiate it. We have a whole spreadsheet. You can actually go to our website, and we can put that maybe in the show notes. But there's a Google sheet that we have. You can use the same Google sheet that we have to set up how much so we kind of you do it by month, but you can say for the gifts, you can say, well, I have 20 friends I'm going to buy for, and then I'm going to spend 15 or 20 on them for the year. And then you take that amount and divide it by 12, and that's your monthly amount, right? So there's a few things. One, now instead of weekly, you're doing it monthly. So they have to learn to kind of deal with getting this windfall of money at the beginning of the month. And obviously some kids go through it really quickly. And some kids, after a few months, most kids will have it figured out that they're not spending all their money when they're flush.
Right.
But it's good for them to learn that, to understand how that works. And then we move them into cards. There's lots of cards out there, debit cards. If you want to stay in cash, more power to you, because that's great if you want to do that. It was just a lot easier for us, more practical to go to cards. Plus, I think they need to learn that digital money is just like real money, So, and the cards that are out there, you can put them into the same jars or accounts. So you have a share and a save and a spend smart in the accounts. There's, FAMZoo has it, Current, Greenlight. There's a whole bunch of cards that are out there, and you just find the card that works for you, that's best for you. But that's really nice, because now they're empowered. They've got a card they can go and learn how to use their debit card, their debit cards. They can't get in too much trouble with them. And it's just like the next step in adulting for them.
So then do you direct deposit the $125 into their respective account so that it refreshes their debit card, or how does that work?
So it goes in, and then we have the amounts that go out so they'll get that money, and then I will get money back for the communication, so that since I'm paying that bill. Okay. And then money will go into their save account, and then money will go into the share. And so now they have those two accounts. And a quick point about the share, the nice part about having the share jar or having the share account is that when the opportunity comes to donate, they have the money allocated already. So they're not kind of judging the opportunity cost of something they might spend the money on for themselves. They have the money. And when that opportunity comes up at school, or at UNICEF at Halloween, they have the money, right? So that's the nice part about having that share jar or share account. But all that gets debited. It's all done automatically, which is really nice.
So
and
you set that up. You set that up as the parent, like how their money is. I
set that up.
Divvied up. Oh, cool. Okay.
And then the other thing that we do is we provide a larger allowance, a larger interest on the save account. Because they have bank accounts, but you get nothing. You're not gonna learn anything in a bank account about compound interest that's going to be meaningful to a child. So we have a very high interest that we pay on a monthly basis, which is an idea that came also from David Owen in his first National Bank of Dad, and it's great because then kids realize that the idea is saving money can be very is a smart thing to do, and it can generate more money for you in the long run. So that's what we do. We're currently at 3% per month, which is very high,
right?
But it's meaningful,
right?
So, and before I pay that every month, I actually texted them today and I said, I'm going to be doing that this Saturday. So if you want to transfer any money, transfer it. And I saw a $20 transfer go in from the spend to the save.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's just another tactic that you can use, and you can use whatever percentage. I think David started with 5%, and then his kids were totally taking advantage of it. He said, "This is getting too expensive for me," and he brought it down to 3%. But the main point is that it's getting across the importance of saving money, and that saving money can yield significant money in the long run if you are doing it right.
That's a valuable lesson.
Is there any restrictions on them accessing the savings? Do they run it by you? The savings is going to be for this purchase, or it's on them?
Yeah, and different. So there is the share money can only be used for charitable giving. Right. So that's one. And then the save would have to go to a goal that they've already stated, and we use the waiting period as the kind of indicator for that. So if they wanted a pair of shoes that were, or something, let's say a pair of shoes was $77,
right.
Just to say, because that was something that came up, they'd have to wait a week.
Okay.
If they haven't identified that somewhere, either told us, so we've kind of gotten past putting the visualization. Right. If you can do it, keep doing it, but they don't do that. So they have to announce it, and then they have a week. And if it's over 100, it's be 2 weeks.
Okay.
That's awesome. I like that system of it.
Yeah.
And tying back to charity, I just wanted to share this story because I remember we haven't been so diligent with it, but I remember like the first time he kind of got his money, Valen, when he was like 3, and we had Sunday school, and I think he had just done a lemonade stand or whatever, and we told him, you made this money, I think it was like $19 or whatever, and you should maybe, what do you think about giving your own Sunday school donation? And I remember just his face and how proud he was, like after he gave like his $1 Sunday school donation. Do you remember that? He was like so proud of himself for giving his own like Sunday school donation, and
telling everyone he
was telling everyone, his grandparents and everything like that. And but the pride in his face, I remember that was like a really cool moment. We should be more diligent with that because we haven't done that every single week, but cool.
That is a common. Everybody feels that same way about the share jar.
Yeah,
that it's very easy to forget about it, but that's the reason you put it away, is that when the time comes, you have the money, and don't beat yourself up, because I feel the same way about the share jar. I wrote the second kids book is about that issue, which is that the share jar just gets forgotten sometimes,
right?
And so we don't, as parents, this is actually a larger point, which is that if you're set up an allowance and you miss a week, don't worry about it. Do not beat yourself up. Life gets in the way. It's how it is. It's like, when you're building a habit, one of the things that folks like James Clear, who has a book, Atomic Habits, says, like,
reading it now,
just don't miss more than once. Like that's the key. Like, just if you miss, it's all right to miss, but don't miss more than once.
Right.
And if you happen to miss twice, don't beat yourself up. Just get back and start another chain,
Right.
Yeah. One other thing I do want to just kind of touch on is, so, you built a great argument for allowing allowances, and I like it. I like it a lot. But I just have a lot of conversations with people, who kind of built something with their lives, kind of like self-made people, and they talk about like having this hunger, this drive of wanting to be successful, and because of that, they made themselves super frugal, and they just had this hunger, and they feel like they were successful because they had this hunger, because maybe they didn't grow up as wealthy as some others, and they wanted to have that financial independence or that success. What do you think about that drive, and maybe how it relates to an allowance?
The purpose here is that you just want to put money in its place. Yeah. So give kids that comfort, so that money is a tool, and that is all it is.
Right.
And you can't go through life saying, I'm not going to worry about money, because if you say that, you're generally going to spend all your time worrying about money. Mm-hmm. So you've got to just give them the tools so they know how to handle money, so that they can then just use it to craft whatever life they want to have, right? They have to have those tools. If they don't have those tools, they are going to be floundering. It's just, there's just no way you can go through it. The way our current world exists, you have to be able to deal with money on some level. Right. And the more effective you are at it, the more you can not worry about it.
Yeah, so true. And it's kind of a sad point that there are so many adults actually who never learn that lesson. I feel like that's how they get stuck in the paycheck to paycheck grind, or in debt, is they just never learned those lessons. I remember as a child, I used to do a paper route, and there was one customer we had, and she always said, when you come to collect the money from me, you got to come on a Friday, and you got to come around 5 p.m. because that's when I get home from work, and that's right when I got my paycheck. If you come to see me on a Sunday or a Monday, I don't have anything left. So don't come on those days. And it's true. Like, I think at one point we got 6 months in arrears with her, because we kept coming on a Sunday or a Monday. She's like, I got nothing to give you. Come back next week. And it just like hit home, because I came from such a different mindset of like, very frugal, never, just making sure you got enough for what you need, and just really living frugally. And then to see someone who just is like burning it in a weekend was mind blowing to me. But it did give a stark realization of how, if you never learn those lessons, it can really impact your life in the long run.
Yeah. It really can.
So tell us more about your Money Mammals program. And you said you designed it, and I'm really intrigued by that. I mean, coming from an arts and an education background myself, I think it's fantastic that you developed this program for children that is fun and interesting and animated. You have both books as well as DVDs, I understand. And tell us about that program. Where did that vision come from? How did you bring it into reality, and how have you seen it impact others?
Well, I mean, so I designed these characters, but I really I've been very fortunate to work with incredible folks. So first, my wife and I are the one, coming up with the idea that we should be teaching our kids about money. That's where it started. And then I had this character, Joe the monkey, in my head for a long time, but he did nothing. It was kind of like the Seinfeld of animated characters, but I didn't have any real story behind it. So, it's just a monkey sitting around the house doing nothing. So this gave Joe a purpose. And then, his pal is a piggy bank, Pig's the bank. And then he has some other friends, Clara, his camel friend, who, she's got the hump, so she's a very good saver. Mm-hmm. And then his sister Marmoset, and they're also part of a band. But so I created these characters, but then I had an incredible director that I got to work with. I had the puppeteer. So my wife and my brother wrote the songs. My brother, my wife, and I tried we thought to ourselves, oh, we can puppeteer. And we did that for a weekend and almost killed each other. And it was awful, absolutely awful. But I'm glad we did it, because we realized we're like, well, we got a good idea here. We just stink. And so we kind of reset, and I went back to my producing days, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to hire some really good puppeteers. We brought in a director, and really that's how the team came together to create the Money Mammals. And then from there, it made sense to write these books to kind of build off of the video, because the video is really primarily about saving, and the book's about saving and then sharing and then spending smart. But I also wanted to have something, because as you start to go through the process and the journey and you talk to parents, you realize, well, some parents want to have video, but some parents also want to have books and want to have both those things. And then it became obvious after all of that the parents really needed a plan, because the Money Mammals, no matter how much you show kids and get them excited about it, they really need money in their hands to practice, to learn. It's the other issue with the schools. Depending on where you are, there is some teaching going in the schools. Here in California, there's not, because it's not mandated. But some states, like Texas is, I'm not sure what New Jersey is, but Texas is K through 12. And there's a mandate there. But the thing is, that's good, and they're going to learn some money skills and some money concepts, but you don't really learn it until you're practicing with it. Right. And that's why it has to be, if it has to be in the home. It's great if it's in home and school, but it has to be in the home.
Right.
And that's the that's been the big focus, and providing materials for the home. We also provide materials through our program with credit unions to the schools. But that home area is so important, because I'm not sure that that's stressed enough. And that's one of the things we want to get across. And so we can start really early, preschool, with the Money Mammals up through kind of young school age. And then from there, the parents now can just take that excitement, start their Art of Allowance program, and they're going to be in pretty good shape to then move into teaching them the concepts that they need to move into the young adult and adult phases of their lives.
Do you have like resource pages and like step-by-step programs for parents to follow, kind of like an easy guide to reinforcing the concepts built into your Money Mammals program?
Yeah, so we have on our site, themoneymammals.com, we've also got we have a teaching guide that teachers can use, but parents can also use. But we have reading guides for each of the books, and they've got fun activities. And then the Art of Allowance itself is really, I wanted to make it as practical as possible for parents. So it's short, easy to use, lays out the steps, and really lays out it's really a framework, because that's why it's the Art of Allowance. It's my art. It's going to be different from your art. It's going to be different from another person's art. Everybody's going to create their own program based on their own family, but there are key guidelines, teaching your kids about needs versus wants, teaching them to set and save for goals, teaching them to make smart money choices. Those are kind of core elements that are weaved throughout the program. But it's easy to follow, easy to get started with your kid. And even if you haven't started and you have a teenager, you can get started. You start with a breakthrough allowance with just one part of it. Start with just the close, just bite off that in the beginning, and you can move pretty quickly to the other responsibilities once you've kind of got a head of steam going.
Right. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. And the fact that you've made it fun and interactive as a way of broaching that subject is really great, because I think a lot of parents struggle with, like, how do I start this conversation and make it actually stick? How is it going to interest my child? So that's a great program you've pulled together.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting kind of long on the show, but I feel like I still want to ask you a few questions. We've dove really deep on like parenting and interacting with kids. Do you have any like specific advice for, it sounds like you have a great relationship with your wife, talking about these money subjects and, creating these programs together. Do you have any specific advice for families, young couples just starting out, centering around any topic? Could be money, could be something else.
Well, I hesitate to give kind of family advice, because it's so specific to our family. I happen to get lucky that that I found my wife and she can stand me on a long-term basis. So that's good. I would say, I'll kind of go back to to kids and money and parents. So is for parents, once they have kids, is, you are probably going to, unless you are Warren Buffett, you're going to be, and probably even he worries about it, you're going to be worried that you're not prepared to teach your kids about money, right? That is natural. It's the same. I mean, it's the same for all of us. We're all, my 16-year-old asked me routinely, like, are we just an experiment? Pretty much. Pretty much. And you just want to get better at the experiment as you go along. So, right. But I think the way to think about it is just, grab onto this, to some of don't worry that you're not, an investing expert, or that you're not even a money expert. Improve. If you haven't been very frugal, then just, improve wherever you can, so that you're modeling the best you can for your kids. But most importantly, going way back to the beginning of our conversation, is you just want to be prepared to have that conversation with your kids when it comes up, because they're going to be asking you. And if you don't answer that question, then it's going to be answered by, whatever media that they're consuming, what their friends are saying, and you have no idea. Now, they may get lucky, but why not be purposeful about it? Right. And I think you just embrace it too. It's actually kind of fun to realize, it's like, well, I'm not very good at this, but I'm not an investing expert, but but she wants to buy some stock. I certainly have an account. We can do that, and let's see where it goes. And like we talked about before, it's amazing where it goes. Yeah. So you just being open to the conversation leads you to all these amazing, these really incredible learning opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. John,
so embrace the fear. I guess that's the...
Yeah, no, that's a good one. John, I want to thank you so much. I feel like you really laid out a great framework for parents. If people want to dig deeper, definitely, The Art of Allowance sounds like a great read. If people want to reach out to you, love what you have to say, how can they kind of get in contact with you and learn more about what you have to say on the topic of money and kids?
But the easiest thing is to go to the site, to themoneymammals.com. And that you can find me there, and I love talking about this. So I'm also on Twitter if you want to reach out to me there, although I'm not overly active on social media. We do have a Facebook account too, but really on the website, I tend to see if you submit any of the forms in there, I look at a lot of all the forms that come through. So if you have a question, hit me up, because I love talking about this, and I love answering whatever questions parents have.
Awesome. John, thanks so much for this conversation.
Sure. Thank you both. This was fun.
Thank you.
Cool.